It began not with a bang, but with a restriction, a blacklisting. In May 2019, the United States government placed a Chinese company on a trade blacklist, citing national security risks. That company wasn't an oil conglomerate or a shadowy arms dealer. It was a telecommunications giant, a name most Americans only knew from the side of a smartphone box: Huawei.
How did this one company, which started as a humble reseller of telephone switches, become perceived as a national security threat to the most powerful nation on Earth? The answer to that question is more than just a corporate history. It is the story of modern China. It's the story of a nation's ambition mirrored in the rise of its greatest corporate champion. To understand how China transformed from the world's factory into America's #1 rival, you must first understand the secret war of Huawei. The story begins in 1987 in the sprawling, chaotic city of Shenzhen. This was one of China's new special economic zones, a laboratory for a radical experiment. After decades of Maoist isolation, leader Deng Xiaoping had declared, "To get rich is glorious." China was opening its doors. Into this brave new world stepped Ren Zhongfei, a former engineer from the People's Liberation Army. With just 21,000 yuan, about $5,000 at the time, he founded Huawei. Its initial business was simple: importing and reselling private branch exchange, or PBX, switches from Hong Kong. In these early days, Huawei, much like China itself, was a student, a copycat. The mission was not to innovate, but to learn, replicate, and master the technology of the West. They disassembled products from companies like Cisco and Ericsson, reverse-engineered them, and learned to build their own, cheaper versions. This was the strategy that defined China in the 90s. Learn from the West, build for less, and use that advantage to establish a foothold. Huawei was the model student. By the turn of the millennium, Huawei had mastered the art of imitation. But Ren Zhongfei knew that to survive, they had to expand beyond China's borders. Their strategy was audacious in its simplicity. They ignored the lucrative, highly competitive markets of North America and Western Europe. Instead, they went where their established rivals wouldn't.
They went to the developing world. They offered reliable, affordable telecom equipment to countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They were willing to work in conditions Western companies avoided, building infrastructure in remote villages and war-torn regions. This strategy was a mirror of China's go-out policy, using economic influence to build relationships and expand its global footprint. While America was focused on wars in the Middle East, China, through companies like Huawei, was quietly wiring the rest of the world. They weren't just selling switches, they were selling a partnership, backed by the financial muscle of Chinese state banks offering generous loans.
By the mid-2000s, the strategy had paid off. Huawei was a global player, a juggernaut in the developing world. They had become the epitome of the world's factory model: massive scale, low cost, and global reach. But the student was growing restless. It was no longer content to simply build the world's infrastructure. It wanted to design it. The 2010s marked a pivotal shift. Beijing announced its Made in China 2025 initiative, a strategic blueprint to move the country from a low-cost manufacturer to a high-tech powerhouse. The goal was to dominate future industries: artificial intelligence, robotics, and most critically, 5G. No company embodied this ambition more than Huawei. While competitors were paying dividends to shareholders, Huawei, a private company owned by its employees, was pouring billions into research and development.
Between 2010 and 2020, they invested over $100 billion into R&D. Their primary target? 5G.
They didn't just participate in the race for 5G, they led it. They filed more patents, built more advanced equipment, and offered it at prices no competitor could match. This was the moment the copycat became the king. The world woke up to a shocking new reality. The next generation of global communication, the digital backbone of the 21st century, would be built by China. As Ren Zhengfei himself would later boast, "I stole the American technologies from tomorrow." The US doesn't even have those technologies. We are ahead of the US. If we were behind, there would be no need for Trump to strenuously attack us. This rivalry is reshaping our world in real time. If you want to stay ahead of the curve on the biggest geopolitical stories, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. The battle was just getting started. And attack they did. Washington watched with growing alarm. The fear was twofold. Economically, America's tech dominance was being challenged for the first time. But the bigger fear was security. US intelligence agencies warned that Huawei's equipment could contain backdoors, allowing Beijing to spy on communications. Then the war became personal. On December 1st, 2018, while changing planes at Vancouver International Airport, Meng Wanzhou, Huawei's chief financial officer and the daughter of its founder, was arrested by Canadian authorities at the request of the United States. The charges were wire fraud and violating sanctions against Iran. To Beijing, this wasn't a legal procedure, it was a kidnapping, a geopolitical power play. The battle was no longer just about market share and patents, it was now about people.
Huawei vehemently denied all allegations. Ren Zhengfei was adamant, stating, "Our company will never undertake any spying activities. If we have any such actions, then I'll shut the company down." But the denials fell on deaf ears. For the US, allowing a company with deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party to build the world's 5G networks was an unacceptable risk.
The campaign intensified. The US banned Huawei from its own networks and launched a global diplomatic offensive to pressure its allies. This culminated in the 2019 entity listing, cutting Huawei off from crucial American technology, including Google's Android operating system and semiconductors from companies like Intel. It was an attempt at a corporate death sentence, and for a time it seemed to work. Huawei's smartphone sales plummeted outside of China, yet Huawei did not collapse. Pushed into a corner, Ren Zhengfei rallied his employees, comparing the company to a bullet-riddled airplane that still needed to fly home. Being able to grow in the toughest battle environment, he said, that just reflects how great we are.
Huawei accelerated its efforts to become self-sufficient, pouring even more money into designing its own chips and developing its own operating system. This fight for survival mirrored China's larger national goal: to break free from its dependence on Western technology.
The story of Huawei is the story of a new world order being written in silicon and fiber optics. It reveals the fundamental truth of the 21st century rivalry. It's not just a trade war, it's a technology war, a battle for control over the very infrastructure that will power the future.
Huawei's journey from a copycat to a contender forced America to confront a reality it wasn't prepared for. Its undisputed reign as the world's sole technological superpower was over. The world's factory had built its own laboratory, and it was now inventing the future. The final chapter of this story is yet to be written. Can Huawei, and by extension China, achieve true technological independence? Will the world split into two competing tech ecosystems? As Ren Zhengfei defiantly proclaimed, If the lights go out in the West, the East will still shine. The question that remains is not whether the East will shine, but how the rest of the world will navigate the light cast by these two dueling suns.
What do you think? Is Huawei a national security threat or a victim of a geopolitical power struggle? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.